Sean, and this is my fourth speech, the persuasive speech, and it's on hydrologic fracking. So, when it comes to fracking, everybody seems to have their own opinion of it, and it seems that people are either completely for it or they're completely against it without really real basis of why they're for or against it. It seems that the people that are against it are just going off of basic science that has been warped into their own opinions, and the people that are for it seem to ignore certain problems that actually exist with fracking. So what we can do about this is pretty much educate ourselves on it and push oil companies to implement this process better, while also ignoring a lot of the hysteria that surrounds fracking from people who are uneducated about what is actually going on. So the biggest myth that people try to push is that fracking will pollute our water supply with toxic chemicals. David Letterman could be quoted on his show at one point, rambling about how toxic chemicals were injected into our water supply and that they seeped up and would get into our drinking water. And then he listed a whole bunch of states that have had their water, and as he claimed, had their water supplies completely destroyed. This just simply isn't true, and in fact, there's no real way for chemicals to get into the water supply if the fracking process is implemented perfectly. The problem is that fracking is never really implemented perfectly, and as Senator Gary Lash talked about, he made the false claim that there have been no incidents of fracking polluting groundwater supplies. Well, that's not entirely true, but it is technically true because it wasn't due to the fracking process, but due to a well blowout that happened at the surface. But a well blowout, even though in this case it did happen while they were fracking, does not always can happen at any sort of drilling method. So the second topic that people push for when they're against fracking is that it will make the water supply radioactive. Well, there's never really been much proof saying that the water supply will get any more radioactive from fracking. And in fact, most things in your everyday lives will emit more radioactivity than what you're going to get out of groundwater, such as computers and even bananas. The third thing that people push, and it does have some basis, is that fracking causes earthquakes. But are they really earthquakes that are big enough to cause any sort of damage or even really be noticeable? So here's the facts when it comes to fracking. As far as water getting in, drilling fluid getting into the water supply, it's just not really possible if the process is implemented the right way. The oil and gas window is several miles below the ground, while your deepest aquifer is only going to be about 500 feet below the surface. So in those several thousand feet of difference, there's alternating layers of different rocks. And each rock has its own chemical and physical properties that are completely different from each other. And as a geologist from New York State put it, it would be like having a dozen bricks stacked on top of each other and expecting a crack to reach from the very bottom brick all the way up to the top. It just isn't going to happen in the real world. In addition to this, drilling fluid is more dense than much of the surrounding rock, and so it would never even rise to the surface, even if a crack was big enough and it existed. So, as far as the facts on radioactivity, it has been found that drilling fluid itself is no more radioactive than the surrounding water supply that is usually found. The radioactive things that you do find in shale formations where the oil is pumped out of are from trace amounts of uranium and thorium that exist in the shale. And in addition to this, geologists use this radioactivity to actually find the oil and gas, because oil and gas has a higher concentration of uranium and thorium. But despite having water pumped through the shale formations, it doesn't increase its own radioactivity any more than your regular surface water. And in fact, in many cases, the shale outcrops at the surface, and houses are built directly on top of it, and they have no adverse health effects due to being built directly on top of the formation that they're pulling oil out of. As for the earthquakes, the opponents to fracking do have some valid points. Fracking does cause several hundred earthquakes just because of the fact that you're breaking the rock apart, and that will create new faults. But these earthquakes, though there are several hundred of them, are no bigger than something you would even notice you won't be able to feel these earthquakes, and in many cases, the only reason that people even know they exist is because of the very sensitive geologic equipment on the surface. So, some geologists have hypothesized that you could get as big as a magnitude 5.5 earthquake in some of the more heavily fracked regions, but even this is barely noticeable and will only cause minor structural damage. So this isn't really anything to worry too much about. Now, as far as solutions to these problems on a national scale, we could try to limit the amount of hysteria that people in the media, and it seems many famous people, try to jump on the anti-fracking bandwagon, and we could try to limit this or quit buying into that. As far as a local level, it would actually be beneficial to many local communities to encourage fracking to be involved in the community because of the amount of economic growth that it would bring. As far as a personal level, it would be most beneficial to research this stuff on your own. There have been many scientists that have put forth unbiased papers on this subject because it's been so controversial, and all the facts are there for you to figure out for yourself instead of just listening to hearsay from random people. So, in conclusion, fracking could bring a lot of potential economic growth to this country, but it's been enshrouded in lots of unnecessary controversy. And if we just learn more about the process itself, we could bring a lot more economic growth to this country. And that's my speech.
That was interesting. I actually liked it.
I do too. I thought it was very good.